An old lion collapsed in the grass, crushed by a giant python's coils, seconds from death. His breath was a shallow rasp, his once magnificent golden eyes clouded with a final, desperate plea. The sickening creak of his own ribs giving way was the only sound he could hear, the world narrowing to a tunnel of suffocating pressure. The serpent, a shimmering river of muscle and pattern, was a force of nature, efficient and absolute. It was the end, and just yards away, 5 colossal gorillas stood motionless. They were like statues carved from obsidian, their powerful forms stark against the green savanna. The lead silverback, the largest of them all, watched with an unnerving stillness, his dark eyes fixed on the grim spectacle. They weren't attacking, they weren't fleeing. They were simply bearing witness as the law of the jungle played out in its most brutal form. But on this day, in this sun-drenched acacia forest, that ancient law was about to be challenged. What force could possibly stir in the heart of these rival kings? What impulse could compel them to intervene in a predator's rightful kill? The answer would redefine everything one man thought he knew about the wild. Before he was prey, he was a king. His name, spoken only in the language of roars and scent markings, had once commanded a vast territory. With a mane the color of sunburnt gold and a roar that could curdle the air, he had led a thriving pride, siring cubs and defending his reign with fearsome power. But time is the savanna's cruelest predator. His strength had waned, and just days ago, a ruthless coalition of younger, stronger rivals had stormed his kingdom. The battle was short and brutal. He was left with nothing but scars, a limp, and the profound, aching loneliness of exile. Now he was just a ghost, haunting the edges of a world that was no longer his. His painful journey had led him here, to this grove of acacia trees where the grass grew low and green. He sought only a moment of shade, a final respite from the pain. It was here that the gorilla troop saw him. They were a family, led by the immense silverback whose mantle of silver hair bespoke decades of experience. Youngsters tumbled in the grass, while females foraged, their lives a peaceful rhythm of community and quiet strength. They watched the lion's pained approach not with aggression, but with a deep, primal curiosity. From another vantage point, Ranger Alex watched through his binoculars. A man whose office was the horizon, Alex had spent 20 years in this park. He knew the brutal poetry of this land. He even knew this specific lion, had tracked its rise, and had grimly noted its inevitable fall. He also saw the python, a deadly ribbon of diamond scales, slithering silently through the grass. It did not know malice, it only knew opportunity. An old, wounded creature moving slowly was a dinner bell it could not ignore. Alex adjusted his focus, a knot tightening in his stomach. He saw the lion, the gorillas, and the approaching snake. 3 separate worlds about to collide. He knew the script by heart. Nature was about to take its course. The python struck with the speed of a snapping whip. Before the lion could even muster a defensive roar, he was ensnared. The first coil was a shock, the second was a cage of muscle, and the third stole his breath. He thrashed, his powerful legs kicking at empty air, his claws scraping uselessly against the impervious scales. Muffled, guttural groans of agony replaced his once mighty roar. The pressure was immense, a relentless, suffocating force intent on crushing the very life from his body. The focus of the scene shifted to the lead gorilla. He stood fully upright, his massive chest rising and falling in a slow, deliberate rhythm. His dark, intelligent eyes darted from the struggling lion to his own troop, who looked to him for guidance. The muscles in his shoulders bunched like coiled springs. This was not his fight. Lions and gorillas were rivals, ancient competitors for space and resources. To interfere was to break a sacred, unwritten rule. With a low grunt that seemed to carry the weight of that decision, the silverback turned his back. He gave a subtle gesture to his family. It is time to go. From his jeep, Ranger Alex saw the movement and nodded grimly. It was as he expected. The gorillas would leave. The python would finish its kill. The cycle would continue. But then something changed. The python, sensing its victory was near, began to shift its coils. It moved with terrifying purpose, its head weaving through the tangled mess of its own body, aiming for the lion's head. This was the final move, the suffocating bite that would end all struggle. It was a precise, clinical act of predation. And it was this act that proved to be the turning point. The silverback, who had taken only a few steps, froze. He turned back, and his entire demeanor had transformed. The passive observer was gone. A low rumble started deep in his chest, growing into a full-throated roar that was nothing like his usual displays. It was a declaration. In that single moment, the law of the jungle was suspended. With a cry that ripped through the savannah, the silverback charged. He didn't hesitate. He moved with a speed that defied his size, covering the distance in a few earth-shaking strides. But this was not a blind, rage-fueled attack. It was strategic. He ignored the python's thrashing midsection and went straight for the tail. Grabbing it with both hands, he dug his feet into the earth and pulled, using his immense body weight as an anchor. The sudden, powerful force stunned the python, momentarily loosening its grip. That was the only signal the other four gorillas needed. As if directed by a single mind, they surged forward in a blur of black fur and focused fury. They swarmed the struggling pair, their actions shockingly coordinated. They weren't biting or clawing senselessly. They were pulling, prying, and working together to unravel the massive serpent from the lion's body. One gorilla grabbed a coil near the lion's neck. Another worked on the midsection. It was a chaotic, desperate, and incredibly intelligent extraction. Finally, with a collective heave, they pulled the last coil free. The silverback, still holding the tail, swung the massive snake around and flung it with astonishing force into the distant tall grass. The python, disoriented and defeated, quickly vanished. A sudden, deafening silence fell over the grove. The lion lay on the ground, limp and utterly still, a tangle of golden fur on the green grass. His chest was not moving. The gorillas didn't celebrate their victory. They stood back, breathing heavily, their chests heaving from the exertion. Then, they did something truly unbelievable. They slowly, deliberately formed a loose, protective semicircle around the body of their fallen enemy. Ranger Alex watched, his jaw agape, his 2 decades of experience rendered meaningless by what he had just witnessed. He knew he had to intervene. As he put his jeep in gear and began to drive slowly forward, the gorillas watched him come. They didn't flee. They didn't roar. They simply took a few steps back, holding their ground, their gazes locked on him, waiting to see what this new player would do. The scene that greeted Alex as he stepped out of his jeep was one he knew he would never forget. The air was thick with a tense, fragile truce. In the center lay the lion, tragically still. Around him stood the 5 gorillas, not as threats, but as silent sentinels, a living, breathing wall of protection. Alex knew that any sudden move could shatter this precarious peace. He raised his hands slowly, speaking in a low, soothing voice, not because they understood his words, but because they would understand his intent. He knelt beside the lion. With practiced hands, he opened his medical kit. The gorillas watched his every move. He gently felt the lion's ribs, cleaned the angry red welts left by the python's coils with antiseptic, and checked for any other injuries. The entire time, the gorillas remained, their presence a silent, intimidating, yet profoundly reassuring weight. They were guarding him, all of them. Then, a miracle, the lion's flank shuddered. He took a deep, ragged breath, then another. His eyes flickered open, still clouded with pain but alive. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the clearing. Alex, knowing his work was done and that his continued presence could cause stress, gathered his things and slowly backed away. He retreated to his jeep, but he didn't leave. He had to see how this ended. He watched as one of the younger gorillas crept forward. It hesitantly reached out a long finger and gently prodded the lion's shoulder. It wasn't an act of aggression or dominance. It was an act of pure, unexplainable curiosity, perhaps even concern. The old lion was too weak to react. He simply lay there, breathing, under the watchful eyes of the family that had saved him. In that moment, Alex realized he had not witnessed a simple animal anomaly. He had witnessed a fundamental truth. The law of the jungle was a human invention, a simple phrase for a complex world we barely understand. Perhaps empathy is a force more fundamental than predation. Perhaps connection can, on rare, miraculous occasions, bridge the chasm between any two living things, no matter how different. A new law had been written on this day, in this patch of green grass, not in tooth and claw, but in an act of impossible compassion. If this story of an unbelievable alliance touched your heart, subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the hidden wonders of the animal kingdom. And be sure to watch our next video, where we explore the proven emotional intelligence of elephants. You won't want to miss it.